Hey everyone, and welcome back to Beyond Real Estate with Jalen and Nick, aka Jalik. Today on the Real Estate Roundup, we're going to be talking about our big companies buying too much real estate. So, a recent article from the New York Times talked about why it is getting even rockier for first-time home buyers, and in that, they cite things such as this interesting statistic. Real estate investors bought a record 18.4% of the homes that were sold in the United States in the fourth quarter of 2021, and that's up from 12% a year earlier. So during this time of crisis and shortages of homes and no one can find an affordable house, what's going on? Companies are doubling down and buying even more properties. So this is something that we're going to talk about. And Nick, I'll give you the first chance just to kind of give your initial thoughts, and then I think we're gonna dive into. I'll talk about why these evil devil corporations shouldn't be doing this and how they are just destroying the American dream. And it sounds like you might have some alternative viewpoints. So, yeah, what's your first thought when you see those kind of headlines?
I think that's the country we live in. It's capitalism, right? It's the freedom of choice, the
Mhm.
freedom to make decisions, the freedom to make decisions on what you feel is the best investment. And I don't know that restricting people the choice that if they meaning a corporation feels like real estate is a great space to invest in, how do you realistically reel that back in? I think is where my first thought goes. Number two, traditionally they've occupied in around 15% on a national level anyway. So for that percentage to be 18-ish percent, yeah, it's a little bit more than quote unquote the norm or their average. Nonetheless, it's not over 50%, right? So it doesn't make it competitive. Certainly it does. Um, I think the other reality is corporations have the luxury to make calculated decisions on where they choose to buy, right? You look at a corporation like McDonald's, they're very calculated to be on corners as much as possible from a real estate standpoint. Why? Because you have exposure on two ends, right? So when it comes
Yeah.
to big corporations buying single family homes, they look to do it more calculated versus just throw something on the wall and hope it sticks, right? I think a lot of uh, first time home buyers, a lot of people that are looking to buy their maybe a second home, a third home, it's not necessarily as calculated because their pockets aren't as deep, right? Maybe
Yeah.
they don't have the all cash opportunities. So I think that's another thing that comes with the bigger corporations. Um, is those calculated buys. So with that being said, Jay, what are your thoughts for why big corporations are destroying? Hearing that in and around 15% is a norm.
Yeah, well, I also so there's a few things that I want to touch on as to why it is more harmful than even those initial numbers seem. So if you're like, well, they only buy about one out of every 10, that's not too bad. I would disagree with that because these larger corporations are also doing this for a long-term play, and they are going to either only sell high when the market's at its peak, or they're going to do things that, which is this is also destroying a lot of aspects of what it used to mean to own a home, and that is short-term rentals. So they are completely taking that house now out of the long-term rental market. So now you have an increase in rents. You have them now buying all of the houses or a lot of those houses, holding on to them for a good amount of time so that they can actually make a return on their money, because they're not just going to buy this for a year and unless it's a fix and flip, which have been around forever, and those aren't the ones I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
talking about people that are going into a neighborhood, buying up a couple dozen properties now, and then either renting those out or turning those into short-term rentals if they're in a desirable location for short-term rentals, which Denver, California, basically any major city is. And so all of these houses are now being taken effectively off the housing market in its entirety, whether that's renting out to the locals, or uh, being on the market for someone to buy. They're being turned into these short-term rentals, and these corporations are going to hold on to them for a longer period of time so that they can make a good return on their money,
But Jay, do you
jacking up
think
house prices and along the way as well. But
okay, so do you think everybody's American dream is to own a home though?
I think it's definitely a part of it, right? It's that full autonomy is when you can own your own property.
Yeah, but do you think everybody has those aspirations? I know a couple people that say I never want to own a home because I don't want to be tied down. They want to
Yeah,
rent. They prefer to rent because they want that flexibility of lifestyle to say, I could go up and move to Seattle next week because my rental
yep,
contract's up. I can go out east and live in Chicago in May 2023 because I don't like California. Um,
yeah.
so what?
No, absolutely.
So do you
It
think
it
that that's a big issue? Knowing that?
Yeah, I think it still plays into it because again, unless those people are now going to go from one place to another, to another, to another, and rent for only a few weeks at a time, a month at a time. Which there's those people that can do that, but
But
when
also yearly. But just take a
sure,
year lease.
but just like I was saying earlier, though, you still have these people that when these companies buy these big houses and they either use them for short-term rentals is the worst case scenario, or if they just take it off the market completely, that's now going to drive a higher demand for rental properties, which now those people are even affected because now if they do want to move to Seattle, well, rent in Seattle's gone up for, another couple $100 a month versus what it would have been otherwise. So it really does affect everyone.
But do you
Uh,
think that rent went up because it's a business? Or don't like if you own that property in Seattle, wouldn't you have probably risen the rates based on what you can get for a 3-bed, 2-bath house?
yep.
So what does it
Yep.
matter if an individual owns it versus a corporation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the bigger thing is, and you referred to it, a deeper pockets. So a single individual isn't going to be buying up a whole neighborhood. I mean, I know that's an exaggeration. We don't like to exaggerate here on Beyond Real Estate, but they're buying up more homes. A single individual, some of the fun stuff that I like talking about with clients is, moving up in house. We've talked on it before in previous episodes. Moving up in house every year after they've now been there for years. So now they can get that primary occupancy and get better interest rates, all that, blah, blah, blah. That's a very slow, long, drawn out process. And they're going to sell those smaller properties so that they can move up into bigger properties, whether that's for personal or they're going to sell those properties to do a different type of investing because they see that they have a lot of appreciation and equity built up. The individual investor isn't a problem. It's there's no way that an individual investor can buy up. Here in Denver, for instance, 50% of the houses or the housing market here is non-owner occupied. So when you're
But
having
to
a
be
housing
fair,
crisis,
that's not one company, right?
no, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so that's why I'm saying all big major companies that are coming in and
Hmm.
swooping in. Again, you said McDonald's, different space. People aren't trying to, McDonald's isn't nudging out the first time small business owner from a local shopping center because they bought the whole shopping center for McDonald's.
No, but they are able to position themselves to buy the best location because in real estate,
Yep,
location, location, location. Right?
sure.
So they have more leverage and they're the
Yep.
big boy on the block to say, I'm going to pay more cash for that corner spot than what the
Oh
mom
yeah.
and pop shop can pay. So is
Yeah.
that an unfair advantage?
No, it's not unfair at all, and it's again, it's a little different with that compared to the housing market. Because yeah, the big boys, the people that have more money, they can buy those houses. They can put in over asking. They can say, "Hey, I'll pay in cash, and I just want this." The owner of or the heir to the Walmart fortune, Robert Robertson, I think his name is Robertson, which is the most ridiculous first name ever. His parents tried way too hard. Um, but he bought 4 adjacent properties in Cherry Hills, one of the more affluent neighborhoods here in Denver Metro, for 22 million. So he's probably going to scrape all 4 properties, and he's going to build one big one. But yeah, if you have more money as an individual, not a problem. If you're now going into a lower income neighborhood where you see a good investment opportunity because of appreciation and what you can see as potential renting cash flow, it's a little different if you're a large company and are able to buy up for a
And you're
house
saying
better
that's
more to
unfair?
those. It's it's not unfair as the law is written now, but
No,
it
but
is
it
unfair to the people that do want to buy their first home, and now there's no such thing as a starter home because investors have already bought all these starter homes, and so now you're just looking at the mid to upper tier homes,
I'll
which
I'll
is
I'll play devil's advocate to that
yeah,
one for the fact that don't you think it's better though for corporations to come in because they can flip that neighborhood that is sketchy, for lack of a better term, quicker than one house at
it,
a time. They can come
they
in and
can
buy an entire block and say, "We're gonna gut this thing. We're gonna make it a more desirable space to live
mhm.
in." And now it's a trickle down effect. It's a domino effect of sorts. Don't you think that's a positive thing?
Yeah, we've seen how trickle down economics has worked for the past 5 decades, and I don't think it's gonna change now it's in the housing realm, because all those homes were supposed to be, as far as the ecosystem of housing, those were supposed to be the homes that a young homeowner can afford. It can be their first one. They
Here,
can make
here,
that their
here's
property better.
here's the but though. In there is when it's
Yeah,
gang ridden. Nobody wants to live and walk their dog at 8 p.m. when they
sure,
know that that's the what the neighborhood is known for, right? So when the
sure,
big corporation come in and sweep out a lot of that,
yeah.
like and say, "Hey, we'll give you X for that house," and people are like, "You paid how much? Like that corporation paid how much for 20 houses?" I mean,
Yep.
don't you think that that's the silver lining of big corporations coming in to run down neighborhoods? Because again, an
Uh,
individual isn't going to be able to afford to knock down 20 buildings or
yeah,
houses and just start
the
new.
the problem that I still see with that though is the working class homeowner doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
They can't exist because
Okay.
that's what it would always be. Like, yeah, you know, Compton is a great example of this. Compton is not the same Compton that was rapped about in the 90s. And that is not because large corporations came in and bought out everyone and their mother, literally. It was people came in that were able to afford it, and they decided to make that neighborhood better. So it was a local grassroots, hey, we can make this community better. We're going to get the city involved more. We're going to report people. If you just bring in a corporation and you do those types of things, it's like, yeah, all the housing prices go up and you price people that are bad actors out of the market because they can't afford that anymore. Their police presence is too high. But naturally, that comes in most circumstances, unless the city itself is dying. Then we're at a completely different level. I mean, people can point to buying $5,000 houses in Detroit, but it's not because the gang activity was what was killing Detroit. It's like Detroit itself was dying because the auto industry and a myriad of other problems were taking effect there. So
So
I wouldn't, yeah,
let me end with this question then. So 18% is what that New York Times article said, right? The
uh, somewhere around there, yeah,
Yeah, so the norm
18.4
the norm is about 15%. And right now your argument
per
is
quarter.
huh?
Per quarter. So we're still
15% of
saying,
all homes per quarter.
yeah. So per year, we can say 15%, just over 1 in 10 homes are bought
Okay.
by
Right.
this corporation.
Right. So if your argument is that's too much for of big corporations, too much of a share, what is what is a good sweet spot in your opinion to be like they should be able to exceed double digits? 5%? Like what is your opinion on that?
Yeah. For me personally, I think that only individual investors should be able to, and I'm talking individual as an LLC where you have one, two, three. I know you can have more people, and there's always a way to game it, but large corporations like, I'm drawing a blank on which university. I want to say Harvard has a few $100 million that they use for their investments. And they've been getting in the housing game. And so corporations like that, it's like you you're just going to buy these not for the purpose of making the neighborhood better
Yeah.
or anything, but because you see a good bottom line, bottom dollar, and that's just not what the housing economy can afford, and that's not what we allow or what we should be allowing, and to that point, even a lot of cities don't allow for a lot of non-owner occupied residences, and That's why Fannie and Freddie have you can only have 10 mortgages through us. If you own 10 properties, you can have a mortgage for all those investment properties, but you can only have up to 10. Whereas if someone just comes in and buys with cash and they're a major corporation, they don't get to
It's
abide
irrelevant.
by the same rules as the rest of us if
Sure.
as a single investor. So
Mhm.
that's where I would say even investors, single investors are being robbed of more investment opportunities where, they can add better they can have long-term rentals. They can do stuff like that. Um but not if someone like a large corporation pays cash and pays over asking, and they're like, yeah, we'll just write out for this appreciation for the next 10 years, and we'll do short-term rentals in the meantime, and we're going to make tons of money off of it. But it doesn't add anything to that town, that neighborhood. And in fact, it just hurts everyone else in it, because also, I mean, think of the people in the neighborhood. It's like if someone comes in and pays for cash more than what that house is worth, sure, it raises the house prices there, but if there's not a good trend of that, or they do it just in one foul swoop and they just buy, five, six, seven properties in a neighborhood, the way appraisals work is that you only look back in the last 18 months on average, generally. So after 2 years, house prices are now going to depreciate in that neighborhood, which then just opens it up for even more of these large corporations to come in and do it at asking now, or go below what
Yeah,
they
remember,
were selling.
buyers determine the selling price.
They do. But if you see a declining market, then you're from even a buyer's perspective, and you see a market's now declining, it's like, is this a good place for me to? Because
Well, what's a
first
declining
home
market?
buyer. Well, I'm just saying, you have large corporation bought a ton of homes for more than asking in cash.
Okay.
Great. All those now exist in the NMLS
Yep.
as as past transactions.
Yep.
That type of transaction does not continue to happen because all the people that were willing to be bought out were bought out.
Right.
The other people that stayed didn't want to be bought out, meaning
Right.
they're going to live there for a few more years. When they decide that they finally want to move out, as if they're if the city's if the value of the average home in that neighborhood has just gone about the regular appreciation, not what we've seen the last few years that
Yep.
are an outlier, but just regular appreciation, and it still doesn't match what that initial investor came in and bought everyone out at a price they couldn't refuse, it's now being viewed as a declining market because you're asking for a property value. You're trying to value your property at what your neighbor sold a few years ago,
Right.
but no one's been able to. That investor that did that buyer doesn't exist. This is a working class neighborhood. People want to do at asking price, maybe a little bit higher if they have to, if it's
Sure.
a hot market. But you as a seller are now not going to be able to get as much because instead of seeing this nice slow increase, it's going to be a quick jump in property values and then a slow decline while the rest of the market continues to do what it was already doing naturally, and then a slow increase back up. So it doesn't help the people that are there as much as it would initially seem, unless they're going to be selling, which they would have sold to that investor. So anyone that stays around is kind of screwed by these big investors coming in and buying out the neighbor.
But homes have appreciated consistently.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is one to worry people to say, God, if a corporation buys near me, I need to be careful because homes are going to decline in value. I think it's just be mindful of what is that purchase price, and know what the market's doing. Right. That
Yeah.
because there's no guarantee that your home price is going to depreciate just because a corporation might have bought for over listing price, because a lot of people have been paying for over listing price for the past 2 years. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
in which
But
case it just sets the bar higher.
again, also I just want to warn people, don't think that these last 2 years are now a trend that are going to continue to happen.
Correct. Yes.
So
You're going to see things moderate. You're going to see things decelerate, but
yeah.
unrealistic to think they're going to depreciate. So
Yeah. Yep.
well, I'll sum it up with this. I think
Okay.
one of the best characteristics of the U.S. is the freedom of choice and capitalism, and for what that allows. I think that being one of the best attributes is also one of the worst, because it opens up a different can of worms that presents challenges like this exact one. That depends what side of the fence you sit on. Are you that corporation that says, I understand the value of real estate and we need to position ourselves accordingly long term to be able to put ourselves in a situation to continue to have our money work for us? On the flip side of that takes out a lot of individuals. So it's an interesting one for people to be mindful of and think through, right? And at the end of the day, I think it's a good thing for corporations to have that freedom to choose. The reality is it comes at an expense. There's always give and take. So
usually of the people with less money, that's who the take is.
Yeah.
First time home buyers, you are the ones giving,
Yeah.
you're the ones taking.
Yeah.
That
is the reality. Yeah, that is the reality of those situations.
Yep.
So let's take a short break, and then we're going to come back with our business bookend, and the book this week being Ninja Selling. Again, those of you in any kind of business space, that needs to be a book you are aware of. So join us after this short break.